Now, I've worked in IT for over 20 years at this point, and probably the thing that scares the shit out of me the most is big data and machine learning. In a nutshell, if you've ever seen the movie Minority Report, where they have the psychics and they're able to go and predict your behaviors, that's essentially what machine learning does, based off of your patterns because of your smartwatch, your phone, your computer, or whatever. However they're able to go and gather this information, they're able to go and build a profile based off of your habits and essentially have the ability to predict what you're going to do. Now, what does this have to do with transparency.tube? Well, in a nutshell, it's going and using machine learning and big data to go and mine YouTube channels and then associate a political ideology with that channel. And that's pretty fucking dangerous. And again, this has nothing to do with opt-in, and so far, none of the YouTube channels that have been labeled can even opt out. And it's a scary fucking thing. Now, transparency.tube got kicked off last week on October 22nd by Mark Ledwich when he posted this on Twitter. I'm excited to announce transparency.tube, the first comprehensive look at YouTube politics. We track the views of more than 8,000 political channels every day and provide an interactive vid for you to see what's happening daily on YouTube. And so far the reactions to this has been pretty negative, and a lot of the reasons why is because there's been several channels that have been mislabeled as right partisan when they're actually either independent or libertarian. So if you have a YouTube channel, it is in your best interest to go and check out transparency.tube to make sure that you're not being mislabeled. And fortunate for yours truly, I'm not big enough to be classified on transparency.tube. Being irrelevant has its advantages, I suppose. Now, first up, we have Clownfish TV, which is being labeled as right and anti-SJW. And if you've ever watched their content, you would know that they're none of those things. I think Neon says that he's libertarian, and I know that Geeky Sparkles has talked about in the past about being a registered Democrat. So like I said, they are neither right and they're pretty much not anti-SJW. I'd say that their content is pretty middle-of-the-road centrist, but yet here we are, they're being labeled as right and anti-SJW. transparency.tube isn't about just manually making a list. It's presumably using YouTube's API to collect a channel's subscriber data without their knowledge or consent. The site isn't even GDPR compliant as far as I know, and GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. If you come over here, back over to Clownfish TV, you can see that it says automatic classification, which means that they're probably using machine learning along with Google's API to come up with this classification. We even have Weaponized Nerd Rage, who is a friend of mine, being labeled as right and SJW and right partisan and anti-SJW. And Webb, as he points out here, is a fucking libertarian. So Mark responds back with, I've removed partisan right, but there's nothing libertarian in your content that I could see. And as you can see, they've gone and done a manual review, removing the partisan right, but leaving right and anti-SJW. Well, Mark, if you ever get around to classifying my channel, there's a couple of things you should know. Number one, you do not have my permission to put my information on your website. Two, I am a slightly right-leaning libertarian, which pretty much makes me a centrist. And three, yes, you could probably classify me as anti-SJW, even though I consider myself to not be anti-anything. I just happen to criticize SJWs a lot, and if that makes me anti-SJW, well, I guess that makes me anti-SJW. Now, we also have this article coming from Reclaim the Net, and it really kind of lists out the issues that I personally have with transparency.tube and why it is potentially dangerous. transparency.tube categorizes YouTubers, brands them with political labels, and could be used as a hit list. It's all there in the title. Now, I do have some left-leaning viewers out there, and I'm sure you're asking yourself, what's the big deal? If the shoe fits, you should probably wear it, Comics Division, along with those other channels. Well, here's the issue. After they go and ban us, well, if you don't fall in line, they're gonna be gunning for you next. Just keep that in mind. YouTubers fear that in a time when the media calls for certain groups to be censored, being speared with a label could be a death blow for a channel. And yes, that is definitely the case. There's a reason why the media wants to go and censor YouTubers, because they see it as competition and they think that YouTubers are stealing their money along with their views. And it doesn't matter if you're right-leaning or left-leaning, the media wants you gone. You are a threat to them. A project launched by Australian programmer Mark Ledwich meant to shed light on politics on YouTube by classifying and labeling channels has been criticized by those fearing that its shortcomings might ultimately turn transparency.tube into yet another tool for censorship on Google's video giant. And this has been the case. We've had several YouTubers that have either lost their monetization or have been banned from the platform. A good example of this is Steven Crowder. Regardless of how you feel about the guy, he lost his monetization for a while. Without warning, they could have said, hey, we don't like this content, take it down. If you do it again, then we're gonna take away your monetization. But they didn't do that. They just went and took it away regardless. Same thing with Alex Jones. Regardless of how you feel about the guy, he has been banned from multiple online platforms, and that's a pretty scary proposition. If you have a very unpopular opinion, rather than going in debunking that opinion, we're just gonna go and silence you instead. And that is very concerning. Very concerning indeed, because typically when you're being silenced like that, if the other side doesn't want to hear your opinion, that typically means you're a threat and your ideas can't hold up to scrutiny. Internet users have been observing and trying to understand the use and possible consequences, and who are convinced those can be negative, have described transparency.tube as anything from a hit list to automated libel. And if you don't know what libel is, it's basically written defamation. It is anything that goes and damages an individual's reputation that is not true. And this is doing it automagically. The idea behind the project, as announced by Ledwich on Twitter, is to track and analyze over 8,000 YouTube channels on a daily basis and provide a visual representation of this as a way to reveal political and cultural views behind these channels. Now, I've already covered the tweet here, so I'm just gonna go and scroll down. Although YouTube itself would be best equipped to produce such analysis, given its gargantuan machine learning apparatus, it has little incentive to do that, since the result might invite more criticism on bias in the recommendation system. Now, it's pretty fair to say, yes, that would invite a lot more scrutiny and criticism in regards to the recommendation system. And if you know anything about Alphabet, yes, they are definitely very partisan in their politics. And there is a video which I'll try and find and link in the description for you to go and watch what happened after Donald Trump was elected. It clearly shows their bias and how they are indeed trying to influence the election. It's not hard to see why this would be an interesting time to launch such a tool, just ahead of the US presidential election, and to make calls for YouTube to step up restrictions of the type of content allowed on its platform, mostly around politics, culture, and pandemic topics. This all does seem rather convenient that this is coming out just before the election. Now, it's most likely a coincidence, but it doesn't mean that this tool can't be used to go and silence dissenting voices, those voices that are counter to Google and the Alphabet company. Ledwich, for example, noted that data collected and analyzed as part of transparency.tube showed YouTube's effort to censor what he called conspiracy content has not been entirely successful. Good. This is a good thing. And that is, it would appear one of the labels transparency.tube put on channels it identifies as such. It is also offering this data to researchers and invites journalists to work with the project in order to raise the quality of content on YouTube, which Ledwich thinks is currently poor. All right, So here's the issue with all this. Remember a few years ago when PewDiePie was being labeled as a alt-right Yahtzee and he lost that YouTube deal? Well, that narrative was being pushed by the media. And it's because these big companies, these big media companies, they hate YouTube because YouTube is stealing all their monies. And on top of that, we have activists that are posing as journalists. And this website, the reason why it's such a bad idea is it provides a one-stop shopping experience to find all the people you want to go and cancel. So yes, in the age of cancel culture, this website is a terrible, terrible idea. Because all they have to do is go there and find the people that are counter to their ideology. Excuse me, folks. Weather's changing and my throat's not having it. And they're gonna go and raise holy hell and try and get the opposition removed. And yes, people on the left, this can potentially happen to you by people on the far right as well. So this is a lose-lose for everybody, in my opinion. From his tweets and from the project's page, it appears that the process of categorizing, indexing, and analyzing thousands of English language YouTube channels is done using an algorithm, or as Ledwich puts, it's a clever model. And again, models are all a part of machine learning, developed to discover and classify channels, and this automation has enabled transparency.tube to go from 800 that were covered manually to over 8,000. One of the big issues with machine learning is that yes, you actually can introduce bias into a model, and therefore that model will go and perpetuate that bias. A really good example of this is that how a lot of these channels are being labeled as being right-wing when indeed they are not actually right-wing. So that is again a bias of the model, and that is the reason why they have to go in manually intervene, because if they don't correct the model, it's just going to go and continue that bias. And just to make things abundantly clear, I want to make sure you are aware that I am by no means a machine learning expert. I do know people who are, and I've had conversations with them about it. But again, if this is something you would like to look into, you should definitely learn about these things and go and educate yourself. Anyway, but not everyone would agree that the model is clever as the author would hope, and I completely agree. I don't think this model is very clever. As YouTubers keep reporting to Ledwich that their channels had been falsely classified as something it is not, usually things that can get them ostracized and deplatformed, and according to online discussions about the platform, those very policies have been something Ledwich opposed in the past. And again, that may be the case here, folks, but it doesn't mean that this thing can't be used for that. As they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And this next paragraph is a really good example of why this type of program is such a bad idea. The way he is responding to many of these complaints has been to remove the label and promise to update the data. But for some users, that is not enough. In one instance, a history channel was erroneously labeled as white identitarian, while another Twitter user was inexplicably classified as right-wing and anti-SJW. For people who are erroneously labeled as white identitarian, that is really dangerous. I mean, you could get somebody fired over that kind of nonsense. And here in the example, we have a history YouTube channel being labeled as white identitarian. That is frightening, folks. That is absolutely frightening. Even Sue Hulk, who is Count Dankula's girlfriend, has been labeled as being right and anti-SJW. Ledwich doesn't appear to have a history of pushing censorship causes, and he previously criticized deplatforming. That's good. And his intention here was not to have been to provide a hit list for political censors, but the project he launched can be turned into just that. And like I said previously, the road to hell is sometimes paved with good intentions. Some have suggested that YouTubers need a way to opt out of their channels being publicly named and shamed in this way. However, others think there may be intent to allow showdowns with political opponents. This scathingly critical comment accuses Ledwich of creating a tool tantamount of automated label and urges him to abandon the project in order to avoid damaging channels and people behind them by applying false labels. Here we can see that Mark has removed what was made, and we have the Twitter user saying that, "Is that it? You falsely label a channel on your platform as white identitarian and you have nothing more to say than that?" That's an incredibly serious accusation for which you owe an apology, and I absolutely agree. If you're going to label somebody incorrectly as a white identitarian, you should fucking apologize. It should also make you reconsider this abjectly terrible project and scrap it. Another point this Twitter user makes is that transparency.tube is or could help those looking to further silence and censor political opponents on a platform like YouTube that's described as already partisan, because it is. In announcing the project, Ledwich rightly pointed out that YouTube has tremendous research and influence in the US these days, where 71% of people use it, and that's actually pretty frightening. Mainly because nobody wants to fucking use Bing, because Bing is terrible. Fortunately, there are other alternatives such as DuckDuckGo, which we should probably be using. Then, to be extra careful when providing a tool that can be used to wrongly classify channels, depriving their owners of their livelihoods, and help ramp up censorship on the platform. Censorship is not a partisan issue, and if you think it is, and you think that you are on the right side of history and that you'll never be censored, you're dead fucking wrong. They will come for you at some point in time. What you believe today to be correct and good may be problematic in a year or two, and you'll be subjected to the same censorship that the rest of us have gone through. Anyway, that's all I have for tonight, folks. Sorry about the long rant on this, but like I said, I'm very anti-censorship, and shit like this really does bother me, and it should bother you as well. That's all I got. I'll catch you next time. Wow, you made it all the way to the end of the video. Well, if you could do me a huge favor while you're here, if you're new to the channel, go and click that subscribe button. Bash that bell for instant notifications. And Hulk. Smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. I even have a P.O. box if you want to go and send me some fan mail. And yes, I finally have received some. Figured I should probably go and update that just because, you know, it's been some time. Well, I've finally done it. I've gone and launched my new website, so go and head over to pixelnation.io. There you'll be able to find all of my current videos, even some past live streams, as well as the thought of the day, week, or month, depending on when I actually get around to writing something. Also, in the next couple weeks, I'll be launching my new forums, so keep an eye out for that. I would love to give a huge shout out to all my Subscribe Star supporters, because without you, I'd still be making content. But in all seriousness, I do appreciate your support and your help. And I'd like to give a huge shout out to my big spenders, Toxic Manflu, MarjieSmiles, and Roger the Shrubber. And we can't forget the Misplaced Mountain Man, who's a sucker with a lot of dough. Thank you very much, everyone. You guys are awesome.